Hi, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me on today's program. Today's program is taken right out of the Hypertrophy files, and the Hypertrophy files are part of a series of lectures that I produce for you doctors out of the Basic Science series for Chiropractic Continuing Education. And today's program is approved for 6 hours of continuing education in the general category by the Board of Chiropractic Examiners. So welcome to the program and thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy today's program quite a bit and that you get a lot out of it. The focus of today's program is going to be on two words, and these are two words that I tell almost every one of my patients on almost every single visit that I have with them. And these are some profound words, and you don't have to say really much more than these two words to your patients. And if you're able to get a head nod from your patients after you repeat this mantra to them, you'll know that you're doing the very best thing that you can for them. And this applies to you as well. Today's program is entitled Exercise Recommendations for Chiropractors and Their Patients. And so today's program is directed, first of all, doctors, at you, because I know what your life is like, and I know what it's like to be a chiropractor, because I am a chiropractor, and I've been a chiropractor for 27 years, and I know that being a chiropractor is a physical job. It's a physically demanding, it's a heavy lifting job. So we have those physical demands on us. Also, as respected healthcare authorities, we also serve as role models to our patients. So it's important that we practice what we preach. And so I direct this program first and foremost to you, doctor, and then also to your patients. And the mantra and the two words that I constantly reinforce both to myself and to my patients, and that I want to impart to you and your patients, is to up muscle. Up muscle. It's the philosophy of this program, and it's my sincere opinion that we need to continually focus on increasing the muscle mass content of our body, and this is regardless of age. In fact, as we age through our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, I don't know where you lie on that spectrum, but speaking for myself, I'm probably at the midpoint of that spectrum and inching perhaps slightly past the midpoint of that spectrum. And as we do age, it becomes even more important to focus on upping the muscle mass content of our bodies. So that's the whole purpose of our program today, is to learn how to preserve muscle mass and how to promote and grow new muscle mass regardless of our age, regardless of our physical condition, or regardless of any limitations that we may think that we have that prevent us from doing just that, from building new muscle. So this is called the Hypertrophy Files, and this is one of several lessons in the Hypertrophy Files, which is a series of exercise, dietary, and lifestyle techniques designed to promote muscle hypertrophy. So today we're going to talk about lesson number 1 from the Hypertrophy Files. And today we're going to focus on some exercise techniques involving and focusing on 3 very narrow principles. We're going to narrow this entire concept down to 3 simple, effective, and extremely powerful techniques that you and your patients can implement right away that will tremendously improve and enhance the benefits that you get from standard exercise, whether those be performed in a health club or whether those be performed at home with simple and inexpensive implements. And those 3 simple principles that we're going to focus on in this program include, number 1, the biarticular muscles, the eccentric muscle actions, and the pre-stretch principle. And of course, we'll elaborate over the next 6 hours on these 3 principles. So if you're ready with me, I'd like you to grab your handout materials for your note-taking benefit. Grab you a snack and a drink and get ready to get down to some brass tacks of anatomy, physiology, and the science behind muscle hypertrophy. Okay, so now let's talk about these techniques, and let's break these techniques out and talk about how we construct an exercise program around each of these techniques. So let's talk briefly about the biarticular muscles. And this goes all the way back to your muscular system training, either in college or in chiropractic school. And there are approximately 650 muscles in the body. Approximately. I say that because anatomists seem to differ and cannot agree on how many muscles there actually are in the body. I've read it that there's approximately 430 voluntary muscles, and so 650 includes all the muscles in the body. And most muscles in the body cross and act at only one joint. So, for example, the brachioradialis muscle in the forearm is a one-joint muscle. It attaches on the humerus bone and then crosses the elbow joint and attaches down on the radius bone of the forearm near the wrist. And this muscle is a one-joint muscle. It acts only at the elbow. And this is representative of most joints in the body. Most joints in the body cross and act at only one joint. But there is a small population of two-joint muscles, and we're going to want to selectively target the two-joint muscles whenever possible. Now, as you know, muscles attach to bones, and the bones act as levers. And when muscles contract, the muscles pull on these levers, and that is how we produce movement in the body, by having muscle contractions that move levers. Now, when movement of bones occur, we say that generally the bone of insertion moves closer to the bone of origin. So, for example, in this diagram showing a pictorial representation of the bicep muscle, shows that the bicep muscle originates high on the upper arm bone and inserts or attaches down on bones below the elbow. And when that bicep muscle contracts and produces movements of those bones, generally we say that the insertion bone, in this case the forearm bone, moves closer to the bone of origin, which is the upper arm bone. Now, origins and insertions of muscles generally follow a couple of basic rules. One is that we consider that the origin of the muscle is more proximal, or closer to the core of the body, or closer to the axis of the body, whereas the insertion is generally further or more distal or more distant from the axis of the body. Second, the origin of the muscle is generally considered to be the less movable bone, whereas the bone of insertion is generally considered to be the more movable bone. In this case, with regards to the bicep muscle, that can be the case, especially in this diagram where it shows the man lifting a green ball in his hand. It's the forearm that's going through the greater arc of motion than is the upper arm bone. Now, of course, exceptions to these descriptions exist. For example, again considering the bicep muscle, if we were considering a person doing a pull-up exercise, well, then the origins and insertions would be by definition reversed, because the forearm is fixed by virtue of its attachment to the pull-up bar, and the body moves closer to the forearm in the raising phase of the pull-up, then it's the forearm that becomes the insertion, and the upper arm bone becomes the insertion. I'm sorry, the forearm is the origin, and the upper arm bone becomes the insertion. So the origins and insertions really depends upon which bones are moving and in which directions. But generally, we say that the origin is the more proximal or the less movable bone, and the insertion is the more distal or more movable bone. Okay, so in addition to the uniarticular muscles, there is a small population of two-joint muscles, so-called biarticular muscles. And the biarticular muscles are muscles that cross and act on more than one joint. And by definition, biarticular, bi means two. So the biarticular muscles cross and act on at least two joints. And there are even multi-articular muscles, and I'll give you an example of a multi-articular muscle here in just a moment. Now, because these joints, these two-joint biarticular muscles, cross more than one joint, they require activation from multiple angles, multiple directions, and with multiple different exercises for maximum hypertrophy, maximum power, and maximum strength. And this is consistent with the prescription that we read about in the Strength and Conditioning Journal. We're gonna activate these muscles from multiple angles, with multiple exercises, and with high volume for the purpose of hypertrophy training. So let me give you an example of a one-joint muscle. A good example of a one-joint muscle is the pectoralis major muscle. Now, the pectoralis major muscle has two heads, so to speak, two main divisions. You have a clavicular division and a sternal division. And the clavicular division has its origin on the anterior surface of the sternal one half of the clavicle, the portion of the clavicle closest to the sternum. The sternal division has its origin at the anterior surface of the sternum, and then from the cartilages of the first 6 or 7 ribs, with a small slip that attaches to the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscles. So here the origin, the less movable portion of the muscle, the less movable bones include the clavicle, the sternum, and the ribs. Now, both divisions intertwine with each other and then insert on the greater tubercle of the humerus. So the pectoralis major, both divisions, cross and act at only one joint. They act only at the glenohumeral joint. Okay, you get that? They do not act at any other joint. They do not cause motion of any other joint. I guess you might hallucinate that there's some minor motion at the sternoclavicular joint, or there may be minor or subtle or microscopic movements at the costosternal joints, but these are not significant movements compared to the movement that takes place at the glenohumeral joint. So the function of the pectoralis major is to flex and medially rotate the shoulder joint. And it horizontally adducts the humerus, it obliquely adducts the humerus towards the opposite iliac crest, and basically the pectoralis major moves the humerus. It acts at only one joint. Okay, another example of a one-joint muscle is the vastus medialis muscle, one of the quadricep muscles. So the vastus medialis, which I have a diagram here for you, those of you that have the PowerPoint presentation, it has its origin on the femur bone. It has various attachments on the line between the greater and lesser trochanter. It attaches on the medial lip of the linea aspera and attaches to, also originates from the intermuscular septum. These are all landmarks on the femur bone. Then this muscle descends and it inserts on the medial base and border of the patella. And so this muscle crosses and acts at only one joint. Which joint is it? It's the knee joint. And so the action of the vastus medialis is to simply extend the knee. That's the only joint at which the vastus medialis functions. And that pattern also applies and holds for the vastus intermedius and the vastus lateralis. We will show that one of the four quadriceps muscles, the rectus femoris, does indeed cross the hip joint as well as acting at the knee, and so the rectus femoris is one of our biarticular muscles. Okay, well, let's take a look then at one of the biarticular muscles. And this is quite fascinating and interesting, and we're going to rely on this anatomy when it comes time to performing our exercises. So let's consider the biceps brachii muscle. For those of you that have the handout presentation, I do have here an anatomic diagram of the biceps brachii muscle. And the biceps brachii muscle has two heads. That's why it's called biceps. There's a short head and there's a long head, and both of those heads cross the shoulder joint. They attach on the scapula. So the short head attaches on the tip of the coracoid process of the scapula. And by the way, there's three muscles that attach to the coracoid process of the scapula. One is the pectoralis minor, second is the coracobrachialis, and the third is, as we see here, the short head of the biceps brachii. So that attaches on the scapula. The long head of the biceps brachii attaches on the supraglenoid tubercle. Supraglenoid tubercle is above the glenoid fossa, also of the scapula. So both the long and short heads attach not on the humerus bone, but they attach on the scapula, and therefore they cross the shoulder joint. Now both heads, the short head and long head, both insert below the elbow onto the radius bone and then send a small slip of connective tissue to the ulna bone. And so the biceps brachii cross, therefore, two joints. Cross the shoulder joint and cross the elbow joint. So therefore, the biceps brachii acts at both joints. First of all, at the forearm, one of its action is to supinate the forearm. So that's an action at the radio-ulnar joint. That's one joint. Now, when the forearm is supinated, it also flexes the forearm. That's an action at the humeral radial joint, or the humeral ulnar joint. That's the second joint at which the biceps muscle acts. And then third, the bicep muscle also flexes the glenohumeral joint, the third joint at which the biceps acts. So actually, the biceps brachii is actually a triarticular muscle when you consider the muscle action of forearm supination. So at the least, the biceps brachii muscle crosses at least two joints. Crosses the glenohumeral joint, and it also crosses the elbow joint. So therefore, it has actions at both joints, not just at the elbow. And how many times when you go into health clubs nowadays do you see people doing endless bicep curls, exercising the biceps muscle only at the elbow? What if there was a way to incorporate flexion at the shoulder along with simultaneous elbow flexion, along with simultaneous forearm supination? Do you think that that would activate more of the muscle fibers of the biceps brachii muscle? Do you think that would activate more of the type 2B muscle fibers? Do you think that would allow you to handle heavier weights on the bicep muscles? Do you think that would allow the biceps brachii muscle to perform more explosive type movements if it was activated at both joints? Well, indeed, that is the case. And whether you're a competitive bodybuilder or a professional athlete or just a person trying to stay in shape or even someone recovering from an injury, we want to select exercises that maximally activate the muscle from both joints. Now, for those in special populations, the exercises can be modified through manipulation of weight or range of motion, what have you. But the same principle applies. We want to exercise these biarticular muscles at both joints across which they act. And that's going to be a recurring theme throughout this program. And I have demonstrations and videos for you coming up shortly to show you exactly how to do it. In conclusion, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I hope you enjoyed this program. Now you have a 20-question examination that I need you to complete and either fax or email back to me. My fax number is on the top of the examination form, and just as soon as I receive your examination form, I will provide you with a certificate of completion that you can use for your Board of Chiropractors continuing education credit. For now, I want to leave you with the website for chiropractors, which is entitled EZChiropracticCEU.com. We're always coming up with new programs, so check the website frequently for new programs designed to help you succeed as a chiropractor. Again, Dr. Perry Carpenter wishing you great success. If there's ever anything I can do to help you, feel free to call. Again, thanks for being with me on this program, and best of success.